All right, so this Boss Steel Blades exclusive knife thoughts video is going to be on this knife, and this is the Great Eastern Cutlery Tidioute Cutlery number 87 English Jack, and this is in Jigged Brazilian cherry wood. And this is part of the Beaver Tail series, which a lot of people really love. It's an interesting series of knives from Great Eastern Cutlery that typically have this really cool beaver shield. But really what I want to talk about on this knife is the fact that it is a new pattern. So if you open it up here, you can see on the back this PPP etch, which the order of the words I've never really gotten a solid answer for, but it's pattern production premiere, or some, order of those three words. So it means that it's the first time that this pattern has been made, this number 87 pattern for GEC. Now, interestingly, there was a knife made before these that and I think other people thought was this 87 frame. And that is this Remington Cowboy Granddaddy Barlow. But as I'll show you in a little bit, it's actually not the same frame. So this is what I would consider, and what GEC has been calling, an English Jack. So what is an English Jack? Well, an English Jack is a relatively large knife as traditional slip joints go, usually over 4.5 inches closed, and it's usually relatively slender, so not a really thick, hunting knife or something like that. Rather, just a longer, more slender jackknife. And so this definitely, is a great example of that. It is definitely a long knife. I'll show you a comparison to a Great Eastern Cutlery number 15, which is a very medium-sized knife at 3.5 inches. You can see that the 87 is a good bit longer, and so it is long and slender. And English jackknives also typically did have a main blade and then a secondary blade. Now, I think that I have seen examples that didn't have a secondary blade, but they did often have a secondary blade. And I've seen both clip point main blades and spear point main blades, but this one has a really classic, long, slender, but not Turkish or muskrat style clip point, but just your typical clip point with a nice cut swedge, a nice long pull, lots of straight edge there, and then a nice gradual belly to a very acute tip. And you can see it does have that beaver tail etch on the blade also. So this is an English Jack, and really the first English Jack from GEC. Now, they did make a pretty similar knife in the 65 pattern. Now, there's been several different versions of the 65 pattern. This is the Ben Hogan version, and this is an older knife. They have made a fish knife on the 65. There was also a 63 pattern, which was a little different, but a very similar kind of size and shape. And the 65 is a knife that I have really wanted to love. This one was given to me by my dad. It's actually an SFA from the factory. So this is a definite keeper, but I've gotten and not kept several different 65s. And that is because they have every single one that I've ever had, as far as I can recall, had blade wrap. And so that's something that's common on a long, slender knife like this. So blade wrap is when the edge hits the back spring upon closing. And with a long blade like this, it's difficult to stop that from happening. You can kind of hear it there. I've sharpened this blade down so much trying to get rid of the blade wrap, and it just won't go away. I personally think that probably 90% or more of 65s have blade wrap. So when I heard that this 87 was coming out and that it was so similar in size and shape to the 68.5, there is an 86, which I will show you, but so similar to the 65, I was worried, oh no, I hope there's not blade wrap. And thankfully, it doesn't seem like there is. I haven't heard anyone say that they have blade wrap on these. Now, this one was loaned to me by Joel of Boss Steel Blades. This is from his collection. But I don't feel or see any on this. And, closing it, letting it close fully. Again, I don't see any reflection or feel any. And then on the other example I have, maybe, which is the oil sucker rod version. So this is the Coal Oil Johnny version. I also don't think that it has any blade wrap. Now, of course, that's only a sample size of 2, but if these had been 65s, both of them would have blade wrap. So really encouraging to see that neither of these two have blade wrap, as far as I can tell. And like I say, I haven't heard anyone say that theirs have had blade wrap either. So that's something that I am really happy about, because it was so frustrating with every one of the 65s that I got, wanting to love it, you know, wanting to have it be part of my collection, you know, something to carry and use, or just, you know, show off. And the blade wrap always kind of making that difficult. So I'm really happy to see that these don't have blade wrap. The other thing is that this knife is made super well. Both this and the other version that I just showed you, absolutely no gaps. GEC has been doing a really, really great job, even compared to their normal, of making these knives recently. So really perfect with the back springs. I mean, look at that. There is absolutely no gap there. The blades are perfectly centered. Neither have proud tips either, which is another thing that the 65 sometimes had, is proud tips. Neither have this, you know, on either blade of the ones that I've seen. The pull is really nice, and that brings me to another example of a, you know, longer knife that GEC has made, which is the 97. So 87, 97, the 97 Allegheny Jack. Right? Allegheny Jack? I believe so. The 97 is a Coke bottle hunter, so it's a thicker knife, but these were plagued by a much weaker spring than what a lot of people like. Now, for me, it's not a huge deal, but it is something that, you know, is not what people were expecting when they got a longer, you know, heftier knife like this. And it's something that turned a lot of people off of these knives, and wasn't really, you know, what you would see on vintage versions of these knives either. So that was another thing. When I saw that these, you know, 87s were coming out, I was hoping that they wouldn't have that light spring like the 97s had. Like I say, not a huge deal to me, but to a lot of people, the light spring was a big problem. And these definitely do not have that. I would call this main blade maybe a 7, 6.5 or 7. On the oil sucker rod version here, solid 7, maybe 7.5. And it feels good. It's not difficult to open because you've got a lot of leverage. But, you know, just a good solid pull. And then on both of them, the secondary is a little lighter, which is great. That's really good because you don't have quite as much leverage. It's a smaller blade. It doesn't need quite as strong a spring. So I think that they really did a great job on building these. As usual, the springs are not 100% perfect, but really close to flush at half stop and pretty much perfectly flush at full open and full close. You can see that on both the main and secondary blades. So really impressed with the construction of these. I think that they're really well done. And then for this one specifically, I think that this jigged wood looks great. Now, I have a jigged wood handled knife from Case that was my dad's, and I couldn't dig it out of my kind of keeper collection for this video, but boy, I think that this wood really looks great. I mean, the jigging is nicely done. It's nice and deep. You know, if you were using this knife as a sportsman knife, you know, to actually use it, if you were skinning a beaver or something, that would give you some extra grip, but it really just looks good also. So I appreciate that. Now, one thing, there is an 86. So this is the 87. There is an 86. And so this is the 86. The 86 is a shorter knife, but a much thicker knife. This is a jumbo jack pattern here on the 86. And one thing that I desperately wish that they would have done with the 87, that they did with the 86, is put the secondary behind the main blade. So you can see here, you have full access to that main blade nail nick. and you just move it, turn it over, and full access to that secondary blade nail nick. And unfortunately for me, on the 87, I just don't really like a pen in front configuration. Now that means that this secondary blade is in front of the main blade, and a lot of people really prefer that. I think that they like to be able to see that secondary blade. They like that you can access them both from the same side with, you know, your left hand as you do normally for the main blade. So people do like having it there, but for me, I don't like having to dig down in here to get into that long pull. Now, I'm not saying that it's really a big practical issue. You know, you can definitely get in there and get that long pull. And being that that blade is relatively slender, it's not super easy. I mean, you can, but it's not super easy to pinch it. And you wouldn't be able to pinch it either way if the pen blade was in the back, because, you know, on this 86 here, you can't pinch that main blade open even with the secondary in the back. So it's one of those things where, for me, I really wish that they had put that secondary blade in the back. I think that it would just make it, you know, a little bit easier to get at that main blade long pull. Now, you know, they did make this knife. And again, I had thought that this Remington Granddaddy Barlow was the 87 pattern, but I just wanted to show here, you can see pretty clearly that it is not. It is not the same pattern. So I am hoping that they, you know, make more of these 87s and hopefully make one with a single blade or with a secondary behind, something like that. And I'm also hoping that they make more on whatever this frame is, but who knows. And more importantly, I think I really like that they are doing new patterns, that they're trying new things, and that they're using a lot of different handle materials. So only a couple different versions of this 87 have come out so far. There is this Beaver tail version, and then again this Cool Oil Johnny oil sucker rod handle version. So there are lots of other versions coming. There's a couple different bone versions. There's a hummingbird acrylic that some dealers have dropped. I'm not sure if Joel has gotten those ones yet. Definitely send him an email or a message to check. But I'm glad that they're doing a lot of different versions of this 87 pattern, and also they're just really making them well. So even though I do not prefer the pen in front configuration, it is traditional for an English jack, which is what this knife is, and some people do like the look of it. But if you are interested in this knife, I say definitely, you know, check one out. It never hurts to grab a GEC if you can, and they can be difficult to get. So like I say, you know, send a message to Joel at Boss Steel Blades if you're interested in these. I think that they're hard for dealers to get as well as they are for customers, but I always love getting to check these knives out and love getting to share them with people through videos like this. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also check out my channel, Knife Thoughts, and my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics, as well as my social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and the Boss Steel Blades social media on Instagram and Facebook. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.